Well, good evening. It is a great second Sunday servant evening to be with you. That usually means we need a condense our lesson and just hit you with the highlights and send you home and send you out so that we can serve people. And I appreciate that because it gives us the opportunity to not just sit and gain wisdom and look at the Word of God, but it gives us the opportunity to live it out and practically walk with Jesus in the ways that we serve others. We've been looking at Matthew chapter 5 in the Sermon on the Mount. And so the verses that we come to today are verses 31 and 32. And so we're going to cover this great topic here in the next 10 or 15 minutes in such detail and such amazing, wonderful, just fully expound the depth of this topic, the topic of divorce. So walk with me. That is not, in fact, what we're going to do. We are not going to be able to even dip our toes into the pond of this great well. We will look at what the Bible has to say, and then I think we're going to apply that to the rest of what Jesus has been saying. Because the message that I've been preaching these last few weeks through the Sermon on the Mount is the heart of the matter. The heart of the matter. If you remember last week, and I'm going to do the same thing this week, so surprise, surprise, but last week, the application at the end was honor marriage. Was honor marriage, because we were talking about lust. Lust draws us away. Lust draws us toward this impure idea, this impure thought. And what Jesus says is that everyone who looks at a woman lustfully has committed adultery with her in his heart. And the application was honor marriage and honor purity. For those of us who are married, honor marriage, support your spouse, love them, cherish them, encourage them, and build them up. For those of us who are not married, encourage and lift up the marriages around you, but also honor your own purity and the purity of others. We'll put it this way, in the positive light. Use the things that you say and the things that you do and the things that you look at and the things that you are actively participating in to encourage and promote marriage and purity. And so there are things that we cannot partake in that are outside of God's design for marriage. And so honor marriage. Honor marriage. There's only one time that sexual activity is approved by God, and that is between one woman and one man, a husband and a wife. And so honor marriage, because lust can creep in and can kill your heart. It is something that happens all of the time. And so it flows naturally from this discussion about adultery and lust and this idea of being self-controlled and following the Spirit into this topic of divorce. Matthew chapter 5 and verse 31 says, "It was also said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce." He is quoting from Deuteronomy 24, and we'll read that in just a second. But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, except on the grounds of sexual immorality, makes her commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Now, the difficulty that we have with this topic is it is a very tender, very important subject, because this idea has impacted each one of us. It has impacted our families. It has impacted our extended families. It might be something that we ourselves have had to go through the heart-wrenching experience and the difficulty that comes and surrounds this. And so what I wanted to start off with saying is each situation is different. And if you need help in your marriage, or if you need help with the things that are going on, I encourage you to seek godly wisdom. Seek godly wisdom in His Word, and seek godly counsel from those whom you trust in, that are in the Lord and will lead you to Christ. And so in this, we're going to look at a couple passages to see what God thinks about divorce, how God sees this. And then I think we're going to try to bring it home for all of us, not just those who are married, not those who have, not just those who have this relationship, but all of us. There are ways that we can improve our lives and walk closer with God. So here's what the passage that he was quoting, that Jesus was saying, "You have heard it was said," was this: when a man takes his wife and marries her, if she then finds no favor in his eyes, because he has found some indecency in her, and writes her certificate of divorce, and puts it in her hand, and sends her out of his house. And it will continue on there. And we don't want to tear that out of context, but this is what he was saying. This is the passage he's talking about. In Jesus' day, there were two schools of thought. There was the Hillel, Rabbi Hillel, and some of the fun things, fun, that's not the right way of putting it, but Hillel said this idea that she finds no more favor, and the indecency in her, that's a very broad term. It's very, very broad. And there was even a list, and you can look this up. If your wife burnt your supper, put it in her hand and send her away. If your wife was a loud woman who could be heard arguing even unto the neighbor's house, she is a loud and noisy woman, give her the certificate and send her away. If she spoke to another man in public, if you find another woman prettier, if another woman finds more favor, that is a grounds for divorce. And Jesus, when asked in Matthew 19, we're going to get there in just a second, they say, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife on any matter, in any reason? That's the school of Hillel. The school of Shammai would say this specific idea, this indecency, is an act of sexual immorality. Indecency, the Hebrew word containing this idea, a shameful act connected with some form of sexual immorality. And that's what Jesus says. This is the way we interpret this. And he spells it out for us in Matthew chapter 5. The other thing that I think really helps us see God's view of divorce is in Malachi chapter 2 and verse 16. In the New American Standard, it says this: "For I hate divorce, says the Lord, the God of Israel." He will go on to talk about how it is shame for this man who brings violence upon his house, violence upon his family, the one who is divorcing his spouse, the one who is being unfaithful to her. And finally, what Jesus has to say in Matthew chapter 19. Matthew chapter 19 and verse 3. On the slide behind us is specifically verse 6, but I'm going to read verses 3 through 10. "And the Pharisees came up to him and tested him by saying, 'Is it lawful to divorce one's wife for any cause?' He answered and said, 'Have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female, and said, therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man separate.' And they said to them, 'Why did Moses command one to give a certificate of divorce and send her away?' And he said to them, 'Because of your hardness of heart, Moses allowed you to divorce your wives. But from the beginning it was not so. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, and marries another, commits adultery.'" It's very, very simple teaching. Jesus speaks about marriage, and it's very simple in its just vast wisdom. He takes it back to Genesis and says, one man, one woman. That's how God made it. What God has joined together, let not man separate. And yet, it's so difficult because when sin enters the picture, lives are torn up. And so there are specific situations and specific things, and we want to be very delicate with how we talk about and how we preach this, because there are real issues in the lives of people. But this is the stance that God has on this idea of tearing and ripping asunder this family, this union, this one flesh situation. And so again, whatever specific circumstance that you might be struggling with, please seek godly wisdom and seek counsel on how you can move forward. But this is the views of God on marriage and divorce. And so there are other scriptures that we could have looked at. There are other things. There's a great section in 1 Corinthians 7 to look at some more details about this. But for our short lesson tonight, I really wanted to take it back to this. What is the heart of the matter? What is the heart of this? Why does God hate divorce? What is so wrong with this? And I came up, I think, with three things, three reasons. And they're relatively normal. They're things we've been talking about for a while. You see, one of the things that is difficult is that when divorce happens, there is the separation, there is the destruction, there is the tearing asunder of what God has brought together, the destruction of a family. So the heart of the matter is that the reason why divorce is difficult is because there's this relationship, there's this community, there's this oneness that has been torn apart. There's oneness that has been torn apart. There's the destruction of the family. The family is one of the basic building blocks of society, and it was built that way by God. Deuteronomy 6 talks about how fathers and mothers are to teach their children and to train them and raise them up. And that was the basic fundamental building block of community, because there is family, and then there's the church. There's family, and then there's the church, and they exist within each other. And God makes us a part of His family. But the smallest unit in our society today is one man and one woman. That is not to say that being single is by any way detracting from your worth or merit in God's eyes. Again, Paul says a lot about that in 1 Corinthians 7. Singleness is still something that is to be admired, that you can give your heart, your life, your desires to God and follow Him. And so we don't want to discourage anyone. But there is the destruction of a family when divorce occurs. Divorce occurs because of the hardness of heart. The hardness of heart. That is what Matthew 19 says, that Jesus will say that Moses gave this to you because of your hardness of heart. Your hardness of heart. There's a hardness of heart, a hardening of a heart towards one spouse. And for this reason, divorce tears each other apart. And the relationship at this point, specifically in divorce, has been torn asunder. And like the first point, there's the destruction of a family because of the hardness of heart. And finally, the third point is the unfaithfulness to the covenant. The reason why it is so challenging and so difficult for God, it is something that He hates, is because the man and woman have made a covenant together, made a covenant to one another. And when the covenant is broken, when the covenant is destroyed, it is going against the very nature of God, because God is ultimately faithful. What He says He will do, when He vows, it will come to pass, and He cannot and will not lie or break the promises He has made. And so this idea that we take our vows and we just throw them away, we tear them apart, is something that goes against the very nature of who God is. A faithful and just person who keeps His promises and will back up His word. And so the heart of the matter, for all of us today, the one application I would say for those of us who are married is the grass isn't greener on the other side, it's greener where you water it. So start watering your marriages. Start watering the people that are the situations that you have. Love your spouse, cherish them. Don't allow your heart to become hardened, but continue to come back in tenderness and love and care for them. But the application for us all, which, again, I did this last week, and it's going to be the same thing for next week. We're going to use this slide for our introduction next week, because the next thing that Jesus talks about, it's almost like He's preaching a sermon. He says, "You've heard it said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you, everyone who divorces his wife, except on grounds of sexual immorality, makes her commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery." The next thing He talks about is oaths. Because the oath you made to your spouse has been broken. And verse 37, "Let what you say simply be yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil." But the heart of this, the heart of the matter, and in the NIV it says, "Let your yes be yes." When you make an oath, keep it. When you say something, let your words matter, because that's what God says. When God speaks, it's fact, it's truth. You can write home about it. And so what it comes down to between you and me, the application for this week is, am I going to stand behind what I say? Am I going to fulfill the commitments that I've said that I will fulfill? If I say that I'm going to be here for the rest of our life, death do us part, then am I living up for those vows? If I've said I'm going to be there on Tuesday at 6 and you're not there at Tuesday at 6, are you standing behind what you say? If you said you're going to take out the trash and mow the yard and do all of these things, stand behind what you're going to say. Let your yes simply be yes, and stand behind the things that we've said, that we have vowed, that we've committed to doing. Stand behind your commitments, and thus imitate Christ, because what Christ says will come to pass. and as we speak, and as we talk about things this week, and as we make plans, yes, let's make plans with God in mind. And there's definitely something to be said about, well, there are circumstances that came up and hindered me from doing these things. But let your yes be yes. If you say you're going to do it, at least come back and follow up and say, hey, here's why I could not make this happen. The broad point is this. Let's use our words to build up, to honor marriage, and let's stand behind what we say, what we commit to do. And tonight, I know it's been a short lesson, and it's been all over the place. But let's really think about how we can be people that stand behind our word, people of the word. And so, the lesson is yours. This week, let us speak in such a way that affirms our faithfulness, that affirms the way that we are going to serve God, and affirms the way that we are going to serve one another. As we go out and we do these service projects, as we do these things for other people, let us remember to be people of faithfulness, people that love, people that honor, people that cherish one another. If you have any need, whether it be to be joined with Him in baptism and die to your sins and live a new life, whether you need help or prayers or you'd like to make a public declaration, whatever your need would be, come forward as we stand and sing.